The conference, so far, it's been very rewarding experience. I think it's always, I don't talk so much about film criticism in the last few years. I had a film magazine for a long time, but I was also programming for a film festival, as you know. So most of the talks I've given, people have asked me to talk about what it's like to be a film programmer and not a film critic. So I'm very happy to share that experience with people, especially people maybe who aren't so experienced in film criticism. We're just starting and hopefully giving them some guidance as to a possible career path that they can take and what the best ways of doing it is. So far it's been very rewarding. That's a very interesting question. To be honest, I don't read that much film criticism today because for the last 24 years I've been publishing and editing a film magazine, and I kind of got tired of it just because it was occupying so much space in my mind. And I also, in a way, I think that people of my age, in a way, idealize what film criticism was like in, say, the 1990s or the early 2000s as opposed to today, when there were a lot fewer outlets. It was before the age of a lot of internet criticism. It was mostly just printed criticism with some websites. So I think it has changed a lot. Some for the better, because I think there's a lot different kinds of diverse voices than there were in the early 90s. So, a lot more female film critics, a lot more critics of color, a lot more critics from different parts of the world that one can see. But at the same time, film critics today maybe have a little less authority than they did, say, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, just because there is so much more of them, and also because as a profession in North America especially, it has almost ceased to exist, and that there are not many people who are getting paid to write film criticism for a living. There used to be a time where people said that, if you need to get a review of the New York Times, it has to be a positive review or the film will bomb the first weekend. But, I'm not sure anymore that makes a difference as much because, as I said, there's different platforms available now for seeing cinema. So I think the opening weekend may be less important. If a review is good, obviously it helps the film. I mean, it's not going to hurt the film. But in terms of a tangible difference in terms of the box office, I don't know if that makes much of a difference anymore, frankly. Because also, but it's more the point that the industry itself, as an art house, distribution, for example, is extremely difficult today. People don't make money on releasing, difficult films that need reviews to help them find an audience. It's a very long answer to say how you program any film festival. But in Berlin, for example, you're programming a film that takes place in a big city. Your audience, you always have to take account of the audience that you're choosing for. It's not a festival like Cannes where there's no audience, or Venice where there's really basically no audience. Berlin has an audience, the biggest audience festival in the world. So you don't just choose films you like personally. You don't choose films that you think are going to, all the films aren't going to impact the history of cinema or speak to cinema. So you have to choose different kinds of movies. You have to be open to different experiences. You don't program a festival like Berlin for yourself. You program it more for the audience, let's say. And in a city like Berlin, which is a very political city, then yes, politics often does come into account. And I think Berlin has been known for a long time as a festival which is not afraid of dealing with political issues or show political films. So that's something we also, a tradition we kept doing it when we were programming Berlin.
Opinion.
There were some. I don't know. You can't quantify. I don't know if I can quantify how many Arab films there were in Berlin or how many Arab films there were in Cannes. I think we have people who are more experts in the region than I am as a programmer, and we rely on their advice and films that they think are worthy of showing in a festival like Berlin or in Cannes. So I think we had a number of Arab films. I remember last year we had a film from Tunisia, I think, in competition, a first film, which was also first film Tunisian Canadian, I believe. So there were films, but there will always be more. In the end, you have to make a choice. In the end, ultimately, you go with the films that are given to you. And if the films aren't of a certain quality, then maybe there's another festival. Just because it doesn't get into Berlin or Cannes or whatever doesn't mean it's a bad film. It just means it's not the best festival that the film is suitable for. I have seen some Saudi films. I don't consider myself an expert in Saudi films, but in terms of getting into festivals, it's the same thing as I just said. The films that stand out are films that stand out. If you want to get into a festival, you should make a good movie. But making a good film is not easy. You have a lot. I would, it's not. there are some people who would say there's a certain kind of film which is a festival movie, which is, you know, what people make just to get into festivals, and that's one avenue. I wouldn't suggest that because I don't think it will work out for you in the end. Maybe it's a short-term benefit as opposed to a long-term benefit. You have to make a film that comes from, you know, from yourself, that comes from your place, that maybe won't find its audience right now, but eventually will. You know, there are lots of things going into how films are selected, and the quality is not necessarily the only one, but if you make a really good film that speaks to people, that expresses yourself, then you have a much better chance of getting the film into a festival. Well, I can tell you, you know, I was there, so I know exactly what happened. And, you know, during the awards ceremony, for No Other Land, which is a film that, of course, we programmed. We had no problem programming it. The government did not interfere in any way or any time in the programming of the films. You know, at the ceremony, everybody was there, backstage. I was there the whole time. Everyone was in a good mood. Maybe there was one point where somebody said something where I was like, okay, maybe that's a bit too much, but not a big deal. Then we went to the reception afterwards. Everybody was in a good mood. Everybody thought the speeches were great. Everyone around there. And then the next day, there was some sort of tacit collaboration between the government and the media to make some sort of event out of it, which didn't come from, I don't think, any popular demand of Germany. Didn't come from the audience there, the normal festival audience. I mean, the No Other Land, as you said, won the best film and also won the audience award in Panorama. So nobody really had a problem with the film at all. There were no complaints about the film. It was really just you know, a perception of a few government officials, the mayor of the city and the minister of culture, that they thought, and the city minister of culture, that something was wrong because it's all, I mean, like I said, it's perception as opposed to reality. And with the media, they managed to create a narrative which then wouldn't go away because the government saw some benefit in pursuing it. So I don't think, in the end, like I said, we were already not going to be doing the festival this previous year, which is not why we selected the film. We weren't trying to tell the government this is, you know, you're doing a bad thing, or, you know, you should be supporting, you know, Israeli arms, whatever. That's not why we did it. We supported it because we thought it was a good film and we thought it had something to say. So in the end, what they did was I think in the end they came across as, you know, the intolerant and unacceptable people. And, you know, people criticized us. It was, you know, I think we did, in the context of what was happening politically in Germany at the time, we did as good a job as we could have done, really. Just by, I mean, our job is to program the movies. We programmed the film, and it showed, and it won an Oscar. And in a normal year, everybody would say, oh, great, you know, a film from Berlin won the Oscar. But now in Germany, like, the film, I mean, the film was released in Germany. It wasn't like it didn't vanish. People, you know, talk about the film. You know, Berlin has the largest Palestinian population outside of Palestine. So it's, you know, so I think it depends on the festival. Some festivals are just completely ignoring it. Like I would say Cannes pretty much ignored the Palestine-Israel conflict in the last 5 years. They didn't want to be controversial, so they ignored it. I mean, it was more, maybe it's less difficult now, obviously, because it's supposedly finished, which who knows, but yeah, I think some festivals did, some festivals didn't. I think, you know, that year we didn't have, I'm not sure we had Israeli films that year in Berlin, but maybe it's just because there weren't any we thought that were good enough to show. I remember I saw some which were okay, but I didn't think they were ready to show. There were some films maybe in Cannes this year that could have been in competition that weren't, probably because of they wanted to avoid controversy. So yeah, I think it depends really on the situation. That would be the answer. And it's a different situation in Europe specifically because, you know, Europe, Russia is so close, Ukraine is so close to Europe and to Germany. I'm just going to say that. So I mean, you know, basically Russia is a country. Much more than Israel in Europe. Russia is a country which people don't want to engage with, don't want to engage culturally with. They want basically there's a cultural boycott on Russian films at European festivals unless they have co-producers. I mean, Russian actors can't act in European films right now if they have a Russian passport. So, but again, I mean, a way I understand that because, you know, between Russia and Germany, there's like Poland. And you know, any second and they control the gas, and so there's other practical reasons why you have to put pressure on Russia. And again, they're not a typical ally. Germany. So I mean, political things are one thing, and it'd be great if film festivals could ignore that kind of thing. But ultimately, you know, at a festival like Berlin, when most of your money comes from the government, you can't ignore certain things. Let's say, yeah. What did I learn? I don't know. I don't know. I think in 5 years, you know, we tried our best to do a program at festival in an interesting way. It was run by cinephiles, which maybe didn't happen before in Berlin, and the audience liked it. The audience liked last year was the biggest audience I think we had in the history of the Berlinale, but nobody cared because you said this controversy, so they didn't even bother to put a press release out. Despite the fact that there were cuts in the funding over the last 5 years, so with all the, you know, there were a lot of problems. We had COVID for a year and a half of COVID, so it wasn't the easiest 5 years. But I think in the end we did a pretty good job, and I think hopefully the people who go to the festival normally realize that you know that in a certain way that people who are programming the festival can make a difference as to what the festival is like. That it's not just you know, showing films, but you have to show film with a certain attitude towards cinema, which I think is something that we did both in Berlin and in Locarno, and now maybe it's different. I mean, obviously the first thing they did was to take away one of the competitions that we created because they thought that it didn't make any sense. So I think people do have an impact even at film festivals.